Alright y'all, here is your daily cut into what happened in the NBA on Wednesday, December 30th. We had a 6-game slate with a whole lot more blowouts to trudge our way through, but there was one good game between the Nets and Hawks that we'll be getting into. As always, I will have timestamps in the description for each and every game so that you can skip around, see what you want to see, but we do have some more content to get into as always. Starting in Boston, the Celtics blew out the much depleted Grizzlies roster behind a very big performance from Jaylen Brown, who had a career-high 42 points in under 30 minutes. In yesterday's video, I called Jaylen Brown the 1B to Tatum's 1A, but I don't even know if that is the correct thing to say anymore, as these two are just playing at the same level. Let's put it simply, they're just playing at the same level to start the season. Both are playing amazing, and if Jaylen Brown continues to take this leap, then the Celtics are in good hands, because even without Kemba Walker, they are producing well, they're scoring well, they're playing defense well, and their bench is even stepping up more than they did last year. I talked about how Peyton Pritchard has been a nice surprise to start the year, but Robert Williams, who has long been at the end of the bench for the Celtics, has also been producing quite well off the bench to start this season, and he's put together, in my opinion, the first week of basketball where he's been productive in each and almost every game that he's been in. As for Memphis, they got a double-double from Jonas Valanciunas, but as I mentioned earlier, they're without John Morant, who now has the ankle injury. They are still without Jaren Jackson Jr. They still don't have D'Anthony Melton, who's dealing with some health protocols. And even in this game, they lost Grayson Allen to an ankle injury as well. And while things look very bleak for you Grizzlies fans out there, obviously, this season, I don't think expectations should have been very high before all these injuries even happened. And now that they have happened, take it as a gap year, much like what I say with the Raptors. This is going to be a year for your younger guys to get some more minutes, get some ability to scout them in a real NBA game. You can figure out who's going to be there for the long run and who you can let go, and get all those good things out of the way while not having the pressure of having to win every night. Someone who I've been impressed with in some limited action so far is Desmond Bane. He was drafted in this most recent draft class, and he's just a dead-eye shooter who can stay on the court and be good enough defensively that, like I said, he can stay on the court. And again, in terms of these injuries, with John Morant out, this now gives Tyus Jones a chance to get a taste of what it's like starting in the NBA, which even if he is back to his bench role once John Morant comes back, he'll have the experience under his belt and it will make him a better player. In Brooklyn, the Nets survived the unbeaten Hawks in a very close game where Kevin Durant came 2 assists shy of a 33-point triple-double. Kyrie Irving and Joe Harris also added 25 points and 23 points, respectively, while Jarrett Allen gave them a double-double off the bench. My big takeaway from this game is that this was a high-scoring affair into the 140s for each team, and that is just due to the fact that these are two teams who have some of the best offenses in the entire NBA, while they also sport some very subpar defenses. And while the Nets have, I guess both teams really have this excuse of a lot of new players coming into the organization and coming together, and none of these guys are necessarily experts on the defensive end, so there are a lot of offensive talents out on the court, which led to this result. But for the Nets, this was a very good game for them to win in terms of solidifying themselves as a top team in the East. Last time we saw KD and Kyrie on the court, they lost to the Charlotte Hornets in a game that they probably shouldn't have. So to come out here and beat, like I said, a red hot Hawks team, this is definitely a good win in terms of just morale and keeping the media sane when it comes to this newly formed Nets team, because if they had lost this game, I bet the narratives would have went flying at Kyrie and KD's heads for their tough start, especially at home. I'm pretty sure both the Hornets and in this Hawks game would have been home losses. I could be wrong on that, but. And speaking of Red Hot Hawks, even though they did lose this game, it was not despite any bad efforts from their top players. Trae Young had himself a 30-point double-double. John Collins added 30 points himself in what was his best game of the season. And we also got both Reddish and Bogdanovic chipped in 20 points of their own. For Trae Young, he continues to just be a master at drawing fouls. This is something that has really taken a huge leap from this year. It was pissing off Steve Nash a whole lot this game, and I bet it was pissing off a lot of NBA fans who I would assume preside on the anti-Harden side of the coin, because he was getting a lot of cheap fouls, for lack of a better term. Got to the free throw line 16 times, and I can already imagine if he keeps this up, I can only imagine what is going to happen this season, and the anti-Trae Young crowd is going to be out loud and proud. As for John Collins, he was also attacking the paint very well and with ease, as he had his best game of the season. Like I said, he was scoring very efficiently on his drives to the rim. Always a great, lob threat and just pick and roll threat with Trae Young. So he finally got his game going. And with John Collins, I've said this in prior videos, but since he did not get re-signed, there are plenty of interesting options he has for the rest of the season with the Atlanta Hawks, so that will be a fun story to watch as it unfolds, and obviously based on how well John Collins can play and get his stock up prior to either the trade deadline or by the end of the season. And overall, this was the Hawks' first loss of the year. I wouldn't at any point call them a fluke team right now. They are, like I said, a team that was thrown together with a lot of new additions this offseason, and for them to get off to this kind of a hot start should be very worrying for the league, because once they get their chemistry together and figure out their rotations, this team looks like it could be very deadly. In Miami, the Heat got revenge on the Milwaukee Bucks after being blown out the night prior. This was due to a Goran Dragic 26-point performance off of the bench. Bam Adebayo and Tyler Herro also added in some 20-point double-doubles of their own. And this was a solid bounce-back win for the Miami Heat. It was a close game for pretty much the entire way up until the fourth quarter when the Heat went on a big run. Like I said, just typical Miami Heat game. They kept it close to their defense, relied on their best players who were available this game, because still no Jimmy Butler for now. They relied on their best players available to go out and get them points. That was Dragic off the bench. Bam Adebayo had a great bounce-back game after one of his worst in his Miami career. And Herro had 15 rebounds, which I don't know if that's just a fluke or it's good for him, but also just kind of weird. But in the end, the Heat do get the much-needed win over the Bucks, who, like I said, blew them out on national TV the night before and probably embarrassed them pretty bad. As for Milwaukee, they were led by a Giannis triple-double. Meanwhile, the rest of the starting lineup and rest of the team in general had a pretty rough shooting night. Starters not named Giannis finished the night 15 of 55 from the field, and that's including Chris Middleton, who, after a absolutely torridly hot start to the season, had an 8-point performance where he shot very poorly and just could not get into any rhythm. Obviously, their defense made a good point of stopping Middleton and locking him up, so props to the Heat. And Miami, it was just another one of those bad shooting nights, although this one I feel like wasn't abnormal like the Knicks one. This was probably more due to the Heat just having a really good top-tier defense. And even though the Bucks do sit at 2-3 on the season, they still have Giannis. They have no major injuries, no minor injuries even, so it's not time to worry yet. Maybe if they lose a few more in the next week or two, then we start to worry a little bit, but for now, they've lost a few close ones. They've just had some unfortunate shooting nights. They'll be fine. In Dallas, the Charlotte Hornets pulled off probably the biggest upset of the night, and this was their second upset of the season after beating the Nets a few games ago. Now they come out and beat a Dallas team who had just beaten the Clippers by 50 points. And perhaps the most surprising thing about this win was it wasn't the Hornets starters, but rather the bench that had their biggest production. First off, we had LaMelo Ball, who had his best game of the season, where he had 22 points, and then Miles Bridges also had 20 and 16 rebounds off of the bench. It was around the third quarter where the Hornets really seemed to get control of the game. In that quarter, they outscored the Mavericks 30 points to 12, and at one point they were up by 30 points themselves. And a lot of this was due to LaMelo Ball, who, again, had his best game of the season. And if anyone has jumped off of the LaMelo Ball bandwagon at any point so far, I would suggest that you get back on while you still can, because this is only the start for him. He just shot 4 of 5 from 3 in this game, so while the shooting might be inconsistent, it's not a top-tier issue like some other players. And again, it's just going to take some time for LaMelo, and it's going to take just playing experience like for any player does, which leads me to the point that LaMelo needs to be starting on this team. I understand that both Terry Rozier and Devontae Graham have the seniority over LaMelo, but you drafted LaMelo to be your guard of the future. He's proven that he is a good player. Like, obviously he's going to need some time to fully develop, but you should be trying to get him as much experience as possible, and that will be done through inserting him in the starting lineup. And the same thing goes for Miles Bridges. I understand that in his case he has Gordon Hayward in his same position playing in front of him, so that one is a bit less likely to happen. But Miles Bridges has been very good off the bench. Specifically, he's shooting 50% from 3 on 5 attempts per game, which through 4 games might just be a small sample size and unsustainable, but it goes to show that Miles Bridges has been working really hard to get better, and I think he is very much deserving of a starting spot somewhere in the league. As for the Mavericks, they continue to struggle to start the season. They are now 1-3 after their first 4 games. In this one, they shot 29% from 3 as a team, which is worrisome because it's just a bad shooting night, and it's been consistent bad shooting nights for this team so far to open the season. And specifically when talking about this bad shooting, a lot of people have been getting on Luka for his performances to start the year, as through 4 games he is shooting 9% from 3, which is obviously absolutely terrible. And you know, it's bad. He's never been a great shooter. He takes a lot of threes, at least he did through his first 2 seasons. A lot of tough step back threes too, and I mean, he'd hit them at a decent rate. He's sitting at 31% on his career, but obviously a drop all the way down to 9% is very worrisome. And while I fully expect him to regress to his mean at some point, again, it just is worrisome because his 3-point attempts, they're the same ones he's been taking as he has the past 2 years. It's just that so far in these 4 games this season, they're just not going in. And the worst part for the Mavs is that while these threes are not falling, it is hurting the team's success because it's just a lot of missed opportunities. And Doncic isn't a efficient 3-point shooter in the first place. So the fact that he's just hitting them at an even worse rate while still attempting 6 or more per game, it's very hurtful to the team's offense. And without Porzingis having any sort of timetable to return, and Doncic not seeming like he's going to get out of the slump anytime soon, there might be a few more losses that shouldn't have been losses in the upcoming schedule for the Mavericks as they regress back to the mean as a team. The Los Angeles Lakers handled business in San Antonio on LeBron's 36th birthday, #WashedKing, after a 26-point performance from the man himself. Anthony Davis and Dennis Schroeder also added 20 and 21 points respectively. In typical Laker fashion, they controlled this game most of the way, and they had their hands all over the game, and it was a pretty easy dub in terms of their wins. And I just want to say that Dennis Schroeder continues to be very impressive in his third star/third scorer role for this team. In the games where either LeBron or AD have been sitting out so far, he's stepped up and increased his points per game and just his play in general, whereas in the games where LeBron and AD both play, he settles back into his third scorer role where he simply just scores at a more efficient pace than what he normally does, which is very valuable for a team to have. He's someone who can go out and get you 30 points if you need to, but he's also someone who can hold himself back, be efficient, and get you 15 points on like 7 shot attempts if you also need him to do that. And he seems like a very good fit for this Lakers team and their quest to repeat. And on the Spurs side, you did lose, but it was to the Lakers, and your young guys, well, specifically DeJounte Murray, had a very good night against the reigning champs, and he had a 29, 7, and 7 stat line on very efficient shooting, and that has to make you happy as a Spurs fan. What would also make me very happy as a Spurs fan in relation to Murray is the fact that he still has many years left on his contract, and it's not very expensive at all. It's already looking like it's going to be one of the better value deals over the next couple of seasons as long as Murray keeps on producing the way he has to start the season. And most importantly of all, the biggest news of the night in the NBA was Popovich doing his usual Popovich thing and getting ejected, therefore allowing his assistant coach, one of his assistant coaches, to take over as the head coach for the rest of the game. And in this instance, he chose Becky Hammon, which served to be the first time in NBA history that a female was the head coach of an NBA team in a regulation NBA game. So congrats to Becky Hammon. I really hope that either some team takes a chance on her, although I'm willing to bet that once Pop is officially retired and all things are said and done with him in the NBA, I would imagine that he's going to push very hard for Becky Hammon as the next coach for the San Antonio Spurs. And finally, in LA, the Trailblazers were not able to deliver in their usual thriller of the night on NBA TV in the late window, thing they kind of have going on lately, and they lost to the Clippers by over 20 points, behind 28 points from Kawhi in his return, the masked return, which I'll be getting into, and a near 23-point triple-double from MVPG candidate, because that's a thing. So overall, Kawhi looked like the old Kawhi, on the court at least. Physically, he was donning this weirdly shaped mask that had NBA Twitter up in flames, making memes about. And I just wanted, what was the point of it? What was it protecting? And I know he had the cut on his face. Was it simply just, to cover the... I don't know, but Kawhi was doing his usual thing while looking a bit goofy. MVPG13 continued his MVP candidacy. And yes, I'm going to continue to say this and make this a thing because Paul George needs to get some regular season credit back. I know no one will care until he does it in the postseason, but I think that he's definitely, as long as the Clippers keep on winning and he keeps on playing like this, there's no doubt in my mind that he can't be a candidate for the award by the end of the year. As for the Blazers, CJ McCollum led the way with 25 points on 7 threes, while Damian Lillard struggled his way to 20 points on a very rough 3 of 14 shooting night. And Cantor also had a double-double off the bench, so, Boston pride, thank you, good for you guys, Cantor. Ultimately, the Blazers continue to struggle, at least their defense continues to struggle heavily. In essence, they're going to need Lillard and McCollum to play great every night if they really want a chance to succeed and go far in this league. But last night was very much evident that even if just one of them has an off game, that it's going to go very poorly for the team. While the additions of Robert Covington and Derrick Jones Jr. have helped greatly, just adding two primarily defensive wings to a roster isn't going to turn the defense around, at least in a couple of games. It's still going to take some time, and there's still going to be a not very good defense in general. The Blazers will for sure continue to be a fun team to watch. They'll probably provide us with some more great thrillers along the rest of the season, but I think people are starting to have some seeds of doubt planted in their minds that this Trailblazers team might not be as good or go as far as we predicted in the offseason. And one more important piece of news for the Trailblazers is that Zach Collins had surgery on his ankle and will be out indefinitely, and this is just unfortunate for the Blazers because Zach Collins offers a lot of abilities at the front court that they've been missing out on to start the season, and when Zach Collins has played, he's been very good in his role for this Blazers team, but the issue is that he is very rarely on the court in the first place, so hopefully it's a speedy recovery, but this is a pretty big loss for the Blazers if he's out for a while again. That'll do it for the 12:30 Daily Cut. As always, drop some comments down below on what you thought about the games. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video or enjoy this sort of content. And as always, most importantly, thank you for watching.